Morena everybody, and welcome to our Policy and Projects Committee meeting on Wednesday the 28th of February. Open with the Karakia Timatanga. Mai te pai mona, o ki te tai, mai te awa tonga, raro ki te awa raki, tēnei te hapuri, awhi ai e taratahi, whānau, haramai te toki, haumi e, hui e, tai. Apologies, I have Steve Gallen, busy moving house today. Do we have any other apologies? Will someone move? Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Della. Anyone with conflicts of interest? Nope. Okay, public forum. Greg? Thank you. I don't think I need to explain the procedure.
Kia ora koutou, everyone. It's great to see everyone, your worship and Deputy Mayor and RA and councillors. It's great to be here, and I just know the last thing council really needs is an ex-mayor, especially a recent mayor, adding his 10 cents worth every 10 minutes. But I've come to speak today about something which I feel very strongly about. So I've got a few notes here, so I'll just go through those. I really can't stand by without voicing my concerns about the preferred recommendation to terminate the Wainawa Processed Water Project, which is 6.4 in the agenda today. But first of all, before I start, I just want to acknowledge the work that's gone on before. This Chief Executive and Infrastructure Manager and JNL and MB as well, with the work that has gone in to get it to this stage, and also yourselves who endorsed this project in your September meeting. So I certainly acknowledge that. So I've got 8 points I'd just like to raise, and I'll keep them very simple, and I'm happy to take questions at the end. But as you know, water security and resilience is essential if the region's main industries is to reach its potential, really. Wainawa Industrial Estate is only half developed, and as you know, it runs from the Wainawa River all the way down to Wilton's Road. There's a huge opportunity for high-tech processing, and that is a key economic enabler for the Wairarapa. In fact, it's probably the main enabler. And it's also very key, because of the nature of the work, to raise our deprivation index across the Wairarapa, and also help ease our community's social dilemmas that our community is experiencing at the moment. So I'm urging you to please continue with your work with the neighbouring councils and place this project as a key initiative for Wairarapa economic development. In the report, there's risks that have been outlined, but I don't see those as any more than you would expect for a project like this. And I'm asking you to prioritise your long-term vision over your short-term vision. And we want to create water security. And alongside that, if we can create some targeted marketing and some partnership opportunities, businesses will come and they will add value to what we produce in the Wairarapa, and also bring other produce and other goods into the Wairarapa. And basically industrial land like that is very hard to come across. It's very hard to get over the line these days, and it's there ready to happen. It would be an absolute travesty to say no to Kanoa and their hard work, $1.75 million. Imagine having to tell them to take it back. And I'm really concerned that saying no will also send a message to others that there's no collaboration in the Wairarapa, and local government in the Wairarapa is broken. Really, it's such a key enabler and such a simple project that these things that message that we're broken and we're not open for business. And as you know, with infrastructure, it never gets cheaper than today. And lastly, I just urge you to think of the future, think of our grandchildren, and just as our grandparents provided us with a platform, this will be a key platform for going forward. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Do we have any questions for Greg around the table?
Grace, yeah.
Yeah, so with the increased risks that have been listed out now and the spend going up to 2.7 million approximately, what do you think council could do to make this happen? Because I agree it's an important project and it does have that long-term investment, but it's a huge figure to be adding to our balance sheet. So I just wonder what would be cut.
Yeah, and in the scale of the project, I don't think it's a huge increase, and it is to be expected. But I agree, it would fall on the Carrington ratepayers, and this is a Wairarapa initiative. So I suggest that there's more collaboration across the Wairarapa. The developer of that industrial land needs to be approached, and also other industries too, and other partners.
And are you concerned that Masterton have decided that they don't want to give us the money or invest the money, but it wants to be a loan? Because that's showing that they don't have good faith to engage with us as well.
That's probably for you guys to have that conversation. But if Wairarapa can't work together, there's no hope. And it certainly sends the message that if we want any vision in the Wairarapa, we need one council.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Greg?
Greg, I'm just wondering, Bob Francis, he was the one that initiated the Wainawa Industrial Estate, didn't he, right back in the day?
That's right. When he was mayor of Marston, he initiated the project. Yeah.
Yeah,
He was thinking Wairarapa.
yeah. Don't suppose you've had any conversations with him around this?
Yeah, no, I talk to Bob on a regular basis. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, Bob's not in that mix at the moment, but certainly I think everyone, like in Bob's position, sees the Wainawa, and he saw it early on, and it's gone through serious waves. But certainly, if we want to have an enabler that's going to raise the deprivation index, high-tech solutions for our community are the answer, and processing at Wainawa with raw water is the secret. Yeah.
And as you say, it's Wairarapa as a whole need to come on board.
Yes. Yeah, and water resilience and security is the big one. If you can't offer security of water, you're not going to get anything.
Mm.
But with sea level rise at around Petone, industrial area there, and it's getting really difficult in other areas to get industrial land. I mean, we're just sitting on a gem here. It's got to be done right. Yeah, so please think about it. Yeah. Yeah, just one other thing too. I noticed that in your report too, you've got a oak tree in Carrington Park. Well, wheelwrights love oak as a timber.
Actually, a mature, reached. Still not me, Greg, because that would be a conflict of interest.
Yeah, but I certainly appreciate the decisions you have to make, and I know it's a very difficult time at the moment, but please have that long-term vision and think of the future. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd agree. I appreciate you coming in, Greg.
That's cool. I'll leave you to your deliberations. Any discussions here? You're all right.
You want to grab that tree on your way out?
It's not big enough. Cheers, see you. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Greg.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the confirmation of the minutes. And we have a recommendation there that the minutes of the Policy and Projects Committee meeting held on 22nd of November 2023 are true and correct. We have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Cherry Campbell and Deputy Mayor. Thank you. Okay, item 6 is reports, and we're going to jump ahead as one of our ELT needs to go to a meeting. So we'll jump ahead to 6.7, resource consent update. Volunteer if you'd like to come to the.
Thank you, councillors, for accommodating this. I have a meeting at 10:30, and if this was to run over, you wouldn't get the very exciting resource consent update.
Edge of our seat stuff.
Absolutely. You'll note that given the district plan changes and the statutory shutdown period between 20th of December and 11th of January, that it has quietened down within that resource consenting space. I thought I'd just mention a couple of the ones that I'm assuming would be more of interest to the elected members and possibly the questions. And they will be the 230078 and 230080. 79 and 80, both of which are Anderson Line, and they are rural subdivisions. And you'll note that there's mention of flood hazards in there. That's correct. So with the first one, the 230079, the lots are ranging from 4.2 to 23 hectares. And every single lot has got a building platform that is well clear of any identified flood zone. And then the 230080 also mentions that there is a flood zone on the property. The flood zone is contained on the balanced farm lot of 77.2 hectares and does not encroach onto any of the smaller 4 hectare lifestyle blocks. And other than that, I'm happy to take questions on any other matters.
Do we have any questions for Sol?
Just answered mine.
That's great.
Sorry, just one. It's not a loaded question, but I was interested in reading down through these. What, in terms of percentage of consents that are approved, granted with conditions or
Yep.
just granted as the underlined versus those that are declined, what would the percentage be?
We haven't declined any consents for quite a number of years, mainly because if we have something that comes in that we really think is going to be outside of what we'd be comfortable granting, we tend to have those conversations and suggest that it might be a waste of the applicant's time and money to consider lodging it. So it's more about managing it upfront. And then if they really want to push it and if we really were unhappy with it, we would decline it. But our preference is to not get them in the door if they're that bad.
Yeah, that's what I anticipated the answer would be. And just for the general public, sometimes people out there speculate that councils are obstructive or aren't supportive of people getting what they want to get. But in actual fact, in terms of this council, every, application that fits within the district plan gets over the line.
Yeah, and if you'll note that a lot of them come in as controlled, and if they're controlled under the Act, we must grant them. If they come in as restricted discretionary, we're very limited in our discretion. If we were to decline, it's got to be on one of those matters of discretion. If it's discretionary, it opens it all up. But you'd be pretty hard pressed to decline something like that. Balanced farm block of 77 hectares going to discretionary because of a flood zone. If we were to decline that, and if I was the applicants, I'd be heading straight up to the Environment Court to challenge council's decision, and then council would be up for a good 100K defending itself in the court. So,
which doesn't happen. So, I mean, people have got confidence that they can make applications to this council and get the support they need to get the result that they're seeking.
Absolutely. And if we do have those ones that we're very unhappy about, the best answer at the end of the day that we can give them is we cannot prevent you from putting an application in. However, it's highly unlikely that it would find support within the provisions of the plan for us to be able to grant it.
That's good. Thank you.
I was talking to a developer yesterday who said council had been very good, is what he said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Then you got it granted.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Grace?
Just about the combined district plan, how far off is that to becoming the standard?
Well, the rural zone rules, we got that application into the courts to have immediate legal effect.
Yep.
So they are operative. So that's why we're seeing a decrease in rural subdivisions, which was the reason we went down that path. Officers are currently summarising the submissions. We are nearly done with that summary. They're now getting audited, which has been quite a significant process when some of the submissions were 88 pages long. And, I think at page 44, I was at 120 submission points already. So they've been summarised, and the report will go to the joint committee when they meet in March. And then the decision for the joint committee will be to adopt the summary and the submissions and then call for further submissions. So anybody that's submitted on that first round of it gets the opportunity to submit further, because they might read through the submission and go, hey, that person's agreeing with what I want, they'll back that, or I can see that the officer's submission has recommended that change that I wanted. The further submission period is for 10 days. However, there is the ability to extend under section 37 for a further 10 days. And I believe from the advisory group that we think that that would be the better option, just to give people more time to read the submissions, digest it, and come back to us. So once that happens, then we start getting into the hearing process with all the reports. Listen to this. That's a big process. Councillor Cherry Campbell and Councillor Della. And then a decision version will be released. And then that's subject to appeals to the Environment Court. And then you'll get your appeal version and then your final version. So it's still a couple of years away.
Oh, okay.
Rules being operative.
Thank you.
Do we get developer contributions from rural subdivision?
We get financial contributions under the Act, development contributions under the Local Government Act financial under the RMA. And yes, we do. It is 5% for the roading and reserves, which in the rural area, we can cap at 7,500 plus GST, which is about a land value of 150K. We're increasing that through the district plan because that might have been acceptable 11, 12 years ago. It doesn't cut the mustard now. And it's a 3% split for roading and a 2% split for reserves. Where in the urban area, it's higher, it's 3% for reserves and 2% roading, and there's no cap. It's purely on the valuation provided to council. And then we take the infrastructure contribution, which is 5,000 plus GST. So it's 2,300 water, 2,300 sewer, 1,150 stormwater.
So we've had a little bit of a bonus while we had all this flood of them, but it's going to slow down a little bit from now on.
The financial contributions are paid at the Section 224 stage. So any of these ones that we have granted, they have 5 years to give effect to.
Okay.
Which is signed in the survey plan. And then when they apply for 224, that's when we invoice. So there may be some where they got the application in because they really wanted to try and get in before the plan changed. They may not go through with it.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thanks, Sol. We have one recommendation, and that's that we receive the report. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Della and Councillor Lawrence. Thank you, Sol.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All the best for your meeting.
Oh, I'm here to
Okay, we'll jump back up. Okay.
If that's possible.
Turn the light on.
We will jump to 6.2, which is on page 16.
All in favour. All in favour?
Are we all in favour of receiving the report? Thank you. With any against? Okay. Welcome, Lawrence and Johannes.
So I will, this is just to provide an update on the various consents that we regularly report on, and as well as to circulate with the reapplication, of the Kaipatanga surface water take. We will need to update and provide a water demand management plan, so that is appended afterwards. It's not fully complete because there is a number of options that are sort of addressed at the back, and we've gone through and we need to sort of make an estimate on what savings those sort of options might create. So I'll take it as read, and if you've got any questions, happy to answer.
Do we have any questions around the table? I have quite a number.
Excellent.
Councillor Della.
I've just got one, Lawrence, the Carrington water race consent. I see we're requesting 20 years, but may not get this. Have you had any feedback on that, or?
No. We've got a water race meeting this afternoon. Yeah. No, they're still reviewing the information that we've provided, and in terms of the timescale, I didn't really get any pushback, but I'm on to my fourth consenting officer since the application has sort of started the process. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Encourage one of the Prime Minister's comments about water.
Yeah.
Yes, but obviously we've got to go through the RMA process, so.
Perhaps I could, I'm not sure it will affect the Carrington, the water race consent application round. So your question relates to the reordering of the hierarchy with Manawa to Wai?
Well, that's a lovely thought, but I was actually thinking about his desire to have dams and ponds everywhere. And that obviously he's seeing a need for water. I'm going to suggest that that might highlight funding that might come with that. And so, you know, the Prime Minister's saying that it's worth taking note.
Yeah.
Councillor Cherry Campbell.
Just got a question on 4.2, which is page 17 on the water race renewal. And just the last sentence there saying the actual cost during the period, which is the hearing and negotiation period, is unknown and a risk.
Yep.
I guess my question is, if the additional costs are over the budgeted and they do arise, is there an option for us to have our water race users contribute to any over budgeted?
I think if I may, so the budget, the capital budget for the renewal of the water race consent comes from is within the water race budget, and therefore it's a targeted rate for water race users.
Yeah.
So if it exceeds the budget,
It'll be the same.
So the whole activity will be contained. So in years where the water race makes a surplus, it'll be held in reserve, and in years where we have higher costs than budgeted, it'll draw on the reserve. So all of that will be contained within the water race activity.
thank you.
Whether it balances year to year, it is, you know, sometimes you have swings and roundabouts, but it will also, all that cost will be contained within the water race and will be recovered via a targeted rate.
Thank you.
To answer your question, in terms of, I had a consultant request a CAT fund of about 140,000, anticipating the consenting process.
Wow.
Thanks.
Recently.
It'll go down well at water race, won't it, Brian?
Councillor Ailing.
My question was regarding what Jeff was alluding to with the change in the national policy statement, with the freshwater quality being the primary thing that we look at. How is that going to impact this plan?
The management plan?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought it's really going to affect it too much. Yeah, it's something we've got to do as part of the process at the moment anyway. So, and this was originally put together and drafted around 2014, 2015, when they went for the first consent. So it's just a reiteration of that and updating it for the actual proposed natural resources plan. Sorry, not proposed anymore.
Can I add to that? I suspect it'll show up in low flow, Councillor Ailing. So at the moment, low flow tends to prioritise the environment and the life of the water, the why of the water, as a higher priority compared to the use of water for human consumption, for example. So that's priority 3, whereas the health of the water supply is priority 1. If they are reordered, I expect where potentially the priorities for human health or consumption of water will move up, and that may show up in the low flow takes being less important or being raised, so that we can still take water in low flow, particularly where it's for town supply, like in the Timatanga water take.
Yeah.
And that would have a detrimental impact on the river in your.
Yes.
Where it would have an impact. Because the priorities have changed within that hierarchy. Sure, sorry, Chair.
Is that okay? Right. I just want to reflect officers. I think being quite humble because the last meeting that we had with the water users and Māori were in the room was particularly a great meeting. And that the agreement of the users in terms of te mana o te wai was a pretty important factor that Māori were looking at and was agreed to. I agree with the low levels of water, but something that's in our water races called mudfish. I think you're familiar with them. They like the fluctuation in terms of water. And so getting down fairly low is something that actually encourages them and discourages trout. So there's some kind of advantages in the fluctuation. But I did want to reflect on that meeting because I think your answer has been, well, there's going to be some and we're worried, but I think the Māori community were on side with te mana o te wai, even given that there were going to be changes that were signalled anyway, but they felt that the users in terms of the water race understood the Māori perspective and we're working with it.
Sure, thank you.
Councillor Lawrence.
This is just a semantic question, really. Through this, you talk about water being abstracted from the stream.
Yes.
I
That's
thought you would say extracted, but you can probably explain what that means.
abstracted, I think, is like an extraction, rather it's diversion for the surface water. But yeah, I think it's just a different word, but it means the same thing.
Great question. I don't think it does, but that's okay.
Do you own a bookshop?
Yeah, I'm here defending the language.
Extraction was English. Extraction was going to be totally removing the water from the source or from the water race or from the from that environment, where abstraction is to pull the water up and spread it across by keeping it in the system. In the system. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it probably does go into that mana o te wai in terms of it just changes state in terms of the water as it goes through the process.
It does bring up that study that's been done about groundwater, and so being a little more accurate with where you can pull water up, where water can where you can recharge aquifers, all possibilities of the study that are it's 2 years away now, but if we were sitting on thinking about better information or better results, then that would be a study that I'd suggest would allow us to think better about groundwater flows and the opportunity for flooding surfaces to recharge aquifers, etc.
Mhm.
May I ask a clarification question?
About abstraction.
Not nearly as deep. My understanding. So Lawrence, I just wonder if you could clarify the landfill renewal on 4.3. You make a comment here where the initial application for the landfill, discharge of stormwater from the landfill, was included in the wastewater treatment plant renewal. And then you go on to say something about the pond desludging.
Yeah.
So can you just talk us through how the landfill is linked with the wastewater pond desludging? Because generally speaking, we might think that they are two disparate things.
Yeah. So during the reconsenting, there was discussions around what was done with the sludge from the wastewater treatment plant. And previously they had been exposing and putting it in the old contained cells.
In the landfill.
In the landfill, yeah. So that wasn't exactly clear and there was a lot of discussion. So it was separated out in terms of at that time of that consenting until we had a clear path about when things needed to be desludged and then what was actually going to happen to that sludge. So yeah, it's just clarification on terms of that. so that they can take that into consideration on how we're using the landfill.
Thank you.
Lawrence, please bear with me. I have quite a few questions. They're more based around the water demand management plan. So one of them is around the Kaipatanga to consent renewal. Is that going to include gravel extraction in that consent application?
It would, basically, we're going to try to retain similar sort of processes of what we're doing. And that would be any accumulated gravel behind the dam that's already existing. And that's maintain that storage, which is usually retained as a firefighting capacity because we don't use it for abstraction or diversion to the water treatment.
In excess of the standard allowance that Greater Wellington have for gravel extraction. So I think 50 cubic metres per annum is allowed.
Yeah.
So what you're talking about would be gravel extraction in excess of.
Yeah.
But as a maintenance activity.
Okay. On page 28, it mentions the NRP policy 118 requires reasonable and efficient use measures that must be addressed for community drinking water supplies as listed in NRP Schedule Q.
Yeah.
I find point B to be very concerning in regard to how the council will manage the water used by all sectors connected to the network when restrictions are in place. So I'm kind of asking, to what lengths are they wanting councils to go? Does that mean we're going to have to, we'll have like, there might be cow only days, like things like that?
Potentially, yeah. But that's one reason why we've got two alternative sources. So that restriction would be on we'd have to state we're going to use 1,000 cubic metres and that's just for the residential population. But because we've also got the groundwater source for the Frederick Street, that doesn't have the same level of restrictions. So we can still supply for a greater one, but basically this is just if we're only using the Kapatangata surface water, we have to specify what the health needs of the people are.
May I add? The application here is for the water supply to the reticulated town network. So we don't have a great number of farmers who are using the town network for stock use. We do have some, but we don't have a massive number. So you will see, as we came into Christmas, we came out with water restrictions and here's what we expect our community to do. So even though we thought we may be able to, even if we thought we could get through the summer period with water supply, so last summer was a really good example, it was raining quite a lot. We came out with a water restrictions campaign. That's part of this. It just shows Greater Wellington Regional Council that we are managing the supply of water appropriately and diligently throughout the year for all users. And that goes to support us when we make a consent application for another take later on or an extension of our existing take. I think you make a really good point that most of that has been targeted at urban users and it hasn't been targeted at those periphery users who are connected to the urban supply. And I think that's a very good point.
These all are just working their way through this so with the new NRP coming into effect, we were informed that our existing water supply demand or usage would potentially take us out to 2043. So it just concerns me on page 29, the second paragraph where it says there is no explicit provision in the NRP allocation framework for new future uses or for population growth within community drinking water supply areas. There is no spare water in the system. So my question is has the new NPS changed that we will have a resilient supply out to 2043 that allows for growth?
So we're going to anticipate we're going to project what the growth rates will be and request and make sure that we are going to meet that. Right, that's probably, I have been updating this, and at that time they were thinking there was going to be a shortfall in terms of what we can actually supply into the town, hence the alternative water source management. Water source report that went through, and that's one reason why we're making sure that we're trying to get everything and what we can from the Kaipa Tangata, because that was one of the outcomes from it, was that the retention of that supply meant that we had sufficient going forward for that source. So that's probably an old statement, which I need to amend. Thank you.
Then that leads on to page 30.
Yep.
Which it talks about the surface and groundwater takes, and it says that we're authorised to abstract 6,500 cubic metres a day from the bore field, but it says the sustainable yield's only 4,500 cubic metres per day. So that again, it makes me question, are we resilient out to 2043?
So demand at the moment, usually at the on average, is around the 3,000. So there is some capacity for that growth. And then that would be similar to what we have done previously. Potentially, we've got an option to put another bore and have it underneath that same allocation. But it's just the sustainable ones of the existing bores.
But I'm just thinking about our resilience taking us out to 2043. So was that based on the 6,500 metre cube per day, or was it based on a sustainable yield of 4,500 cubic metres per day?
Sustainable yield, but that's what we've requested in the past and what we're consented to take. So we can take more, and a short term period will have, as likely to have much effect. However, we haven't run the bores that hard. So that's what I've sort of put a conservative estimate on what the long term. So averaging out, we might be able to have one day where we take a larger amount, but then the next day or 2 days down, it's an average sustainable use.
Thank you. Page 32, does that pie chart need updating because it
on the old,
goes 30% water loss, and I thought we were down to 16%.
16.8.
Yeah, that's a longer term over a number of years. So yeah, we are reducing that, but yeah.
And just down on page 38, I was just curious about some of the figures that, especially one of the figures that's written here, because I think about the each residential property can use 220 cubic metres a year, or 225. Just there's commentary in there about Premier Beehive using 550 cubic metres a year. Is that correct, or is that missing a zero? Because just around the further down, it's talked about other businesses. Down, for example, there's a couple down Dalefield Road, and they're using 1,500 cube per annum, but they don't have the same commentary around them. So I'm just curious, there's commentary around Premier Beehive, but there's not commentary around these other ones, and these other ones are using triple.
I think it's just a single source. And also Premier Beehive, I do need to get updated figures on what their usage is, but I'm pretty sure that the 550 is correct.
That's correct.
Because they've got their own bore supply in which they treat.
Yeah.
So they don't use as much. So I think that's more for the cafe or the lunchroom as much as anything.
Okay. That's all my questions.
Okay, cool.
I just had
if it got any further, as I said, this is to be drafted and to be updated because we will be adding it in as what we're proposing to try to manage our water supply. So yeah.
Thank you. Right.
Just following on from your excellent questioning, because I'm thinking that sometimes hydrological engineering is as much an art as it is a science in terms of, in terms of that aquifer, we don't have a kind of meter going.
No.
It's half full, it's empty, and so you gather what you can, and I think that's fairly reflected. And I'm just thinking that the government's replacement for Three Waters might be something like Wellington Water. And so hopefully they've got more problems in Wellington than they know what to deal with. But you'd hate for them to be laying down the law here when you're operating so well.
Yep.
And so, just, even if there was that, like I totally respect the work that you've done and understand the art versus science part, but even if we had somebody who came across and said, agree with these details, so that it's, so that if somebody new arrives controlling the water, and just given recently this month, what has been said about Wellington Waters having more control over water to the extent that they could even be charging, and so they'll be coming out of what's their council controlled organisation and being a little more independent, according to government ministers commenting in the past month. Then you can secure your supply against what the government might be about to control, and just think that's it backs up your good work, backs up these types of questions.
Okay. Yeah. Councillor Ayling.
I just had one question on the risks to the water supply system on page 31, where it says large parts of the reticulation are near the end of their theoretical useful life. What's the practical useful life left in the reticulation network? What are we basing it off if it's theoretically at the end of life?
So a lot of that is around that we have some sections of AC pipe. Asbestos cement.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that was all sort of installed around the 60s and usually has a theoretical life of about 60 years. So 2020 is around that threshold where it's starting, and we're starting to see some failures. However, in some conditions, where we've actually exposed it, it's actually been in fairly good condition. So we haven't done a robust analysis going through and doing check of what the actual one. A lot of the time it's just been beneficial when we've had to do a replacement and we've exposed the main. We've been able to do a bit more of a condition assessment on it. So that's why there's that theoretical, and there has been some replacement of more modern PVC or other material types.
Condition assessment is also undertaken with CCTV. So
not for water.
Not for water.
Sewage. Sewage.
Yeah.
So when we do have pieces of pipe, we can update the condition assessment. I think there was Kaipatanga. We had a piece of pipe that was going over a bridge up towards Kaipatanga, and we sent that away for destructive testing. It came back in a much better condition than what we anticipated, and that allowed us to update the asset management plan.
Yeah.
So we do continuously do this where we can to move from a theoretical life, which is, as we all know, the manufacturer says, you should replace your iPhone every 18 months or whatever it is, so that they can sell us a new iPhone. And we get this with a lot of the manufacturers and a lot of the products we use. So hence why destructive testing for some of the pieces that we take out of the network is a really good way of determining whether or not those pieces are still intact. But also For example, some of the pipe network under the main state highway gets a lot more vibration than perhaps something down Costley Street where it's a dead end street and we're not getting huge trucks going over it. But it depends a lot on the environment that the pipe is in.
His Worship.
I'm just reflecting, thinking about the paper and reflecting on former Mayor Greg Lang's comments earlier this morning and thinking about a paper that we're yet to discuss. Are we missing a trick by looking more holistically at our water reserves within the Carrington district? For example, we know what's down in Wainawa. Are we thinking broadly enough? Because Wainawa has a capacity to provide us with potable water. Should we have if we had the infrastructure to do it. Wainawa has the ability to offset some of the urban development and retail sprawl. Wainawa in time, if it's successful, will grow into be a jewel in the wider upper crown, insofar as the industrial centre is concerned. And there is water there. Are we thinking broadly enough, or are we just narrowing our focus and saying water at Wainawa is Wainawa and Carrington's needs can only be met within the boundaries of Carrington Township? Question.
And I maybe answer that, Your Worship. So in the alternative water source study, we went through a multi-criteria analysis of different types of sources for an alternative source. And at that time, we looked at various holistic approaches, and actually at the end of the alternative source, the recommended new source would have been to connect to the Masterton source for Carrington. So from recharging aquifers to new bore fields or new surface takes, the multi-criteria analysis suggested Masterton connection to be the most efficient at that time, and with the environmental considerations at that time.
When was that done?
That paper came to council last year.
Yeah. WSP.
Yes.
Yeah, lots moved since then, and we also know that Masterton is struggling right now. So yeah, I mean.
So I think the answer.
Still valid.
The answer, so when we considered the alternative source, we looked at our current ability to produce, to supply and meet the demand. And we ended the alternative water source study. And so now that we've done this work, we know there's a few different options. At that time, connecting to Masterton was the most efficient option. However, all of those options had environmental assumptions attached to them. So if any of those changed, the outcome of the multi-criteria analysis would change as well. So we suggested that the alternative source is on hold until anything changes, and then we can run that analysis again to come up with to give us the best answer.
Thank you.
And the dam might change that.
Yeah, exactly. The ground is shifting and government policy is shifting, and the RMA is going to shift, and we know that that's going to be a substantial shift. We talk about, it's interesting listening to Rawiri's observations. We talk about Māori talk strongly about tēnā rangatiratanga, and tēnā rangatiratanga over water supply, water usage, water management is something that's very dear to everybody, not just Māori, everybody. And I just think sometimes the ground is shifting and we're still running on a railway track that we laid a year ago. And I'm just asking a question, should we pull up the train and see if someone's relayed the tracks and if there's a bit of direction? Just think.
Talk about train tracks.
No, we'll grind them back a bit.
Just wanted to add in kind of another significant thing that you're all aware of more than me perhaps, and that's about electricity generation in our area. And so if you were adding different circuits because of renewable sourcing of energy, and those circuits were running around the district of Carrington, you could actually have quite an opportunity to build on the energy source that's there. I don't doubt that there's more things that you'd have to put into the pile, but just following up on the worship's things that have changed over a year that make something like the industrial park look a little different is to me is energy is one of those.
Okay. Yeah.
Any
And
further,
I just,
further questions?
I just have a question, which I think I already know the answer to. There's
It's abstract.
That doesn't happen.
it's abstract. There's a mention in the paper of Carrington Golf Club. I'm presuming that they're taking a feed off the Chester Road line that we talk about, but that's just for the clubhouse. We're not providing them with water for watering the greens parks, are we? No, that's. I didn't think we would be, but
if you did, they'd be paying for it because it'd be going through their meter.
we'd be paying a hell of a lot, wouldn't they? You know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to finish with a comment. I think our council is very frugal with the way that we deal with our water. I mean, the installation of our meters, we use them. We haven't just installed them and they're not just sitting there compared to our neighbours. But with the new requirements under the NRP is now, and I know Deputy Mayor Williams is commented about this many times, as I have in the past, is now the time where we should be looking at a user pays model for our water, which will be more in line with NRP, some of the NRP statements and conditions and so forth.
And I think that's a very valid point. That's a relatively large piece of work, and happy to take that offline. But you are correct. So moving from blanket allocation of 225 cubic meters per connection per annum to every litre charging model may well be a good conversation to have. We need to do some work to make that to bring that analysis and information back to council before we have that, but more than happy to take that. A very good question.
Thank you, team. We have two recommendations there, and I'm going to take them both together. The first one is we received the report, and the second is that we note the draft CDC water demand management. I'm happy to move that. Councillor Cherry Campbell has seconded that. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you.
Councillor, can you send through all your notes on the demand management plan?
Robin's got the notes.
Got them. Excellent.
We use a piece of paper as well.
Okay. Now we still going to be.
Yeah, I'm happy to share your notes.
Yeah. We still don't have anyone here. About
Yep. No,
we do.
if you're okay, can we move back to item 6.1? And if you're all right, I'll invite.
Thank you. Welcome, Clint.
And so Linda's away, and she has deftly delegated to to talk to the report. So we are considering the oak tree that is in Carrington Park closest to, for those of you who know it, the skateboard bowl. The tree itself has been assessed by two arborists. Clinton, myself, and Linda have sat under it a number of times and talked about both the skate park's plan for development of what they would like to see on that skate park, but also the health of the tree, the health of the remaining trees in the park, and what we're doing with regards to the ongoing maintenance and upgrading of those trees. The challenges you may see on page 13 of the report show that the tree has some fairly big fractures in some of the upper limbs, and they're long fractures and decay. thankfully Clint's found a couple of reports, and perhaps you want to speak to the older trees that you've seen in Northland that have, you know, the age of English oaks and how they cope with New Zealand's environment. I wonder if that might help.
Yeah, folks, kia ora, koutou katoa. Speaking to the health status of our oak trees at Carrington Park, they're all in a similar state of health. They're all at about 70% health status, but noted as deteriorating. This deterioration seems to be common across New Zealand, with exotic trees are not performing as well as they do in their home countries. For example, in England, you've got oak trees that are over 1,000 years old. You've got the Martin oak that's 1,200 years old, the Nottingham forest oak that's over 1,000, but they're all in bad condition and needing to be propped up, and a lot of maintenance work is required to maintain those trees. In New Zealand, what it looks like, a young country, the oldest exotic tree in our country is only 200 years old, and that's a pear tree in Karakia. And it's displaying the same life cycle characteristics of a 500-year-old tree in the Northern Hemisphere. What's happened to the oak trees in New Zealand is that they seem to be getting to a certain stage in their life cycle and deteriorating quite quickly. The oldest oak tree in New Zealand was 194 and 195 years old, and it has since fallen over, and we don't have that anymore. The second oldest oak tree in New Zealand went the same way. That's fallen over. One of the other oldest oak trees in New Zealand's at Plymouth Steps in Wellington. That's 174 years old, just about to fall over. So what it looks like for our oaks, they're in reasonable health. The characteristics of oak trees and their pattern of growth means they always have overextended limbs that require a heavy maintenance program that we've missed out on over a period of about 50 years. So what we're left with is a deteriorating suite of trees that we're needing to take remedial action now for health and safety reasons. We've lost significant branches in the front, and we've over the last 10 years through storm events, and you'll see the big scars that are left on the tree as a result of those things. The report highlighted a whole lot of maintenance issues that we had to address immediately because of the health and safety concerns that were identified. And as you become aware, there's a section of the community asking whether that tree is sustainable. Given the current state of affairs with exotic trees in our country, we can anticipate that the health of the tree will continue to deteriorate significantly in the next 50 years. It would be wise to think about succession with these trees, noting that the tree root protection zone's already been compromised quite significantly, which will add to exacerbate the degradation of those trees within the 50 years. Also, climate change is a factor, and we're getting an increase in conditions that are favourable for disease-causing pathogens like powdery mildew, which we'll expect to, again, speed up the degradation of these exotic trees. So there's a little
your thoughts on the impact of this tree and the remaining English oaks that were probably planted in the 1904 Arbor Day?
My personal opinion on that is they're high value, high aesthetic, high amenity value. Our community, their value has been identified. They are significant. They provide a lot of shade, a lot of amenity value, and recreational enjoyment in those spaces.
And we're likely to see similar things occur with those trees over time, as we have done with this tree?
Definitely. The entire suite of the Carrington Park trees are in a similar status of health.
But this one is significantly worse.
Sorry?
But this one we're talking about is significantly worse.
Yes. Out of all of them, yes, as Clint pointed out, the hard surface around this particular tree has encroached quite a lot, whereas a lot of the other trees don't have as much encroachment of hard surface. And we think that's compounded the problem. Then we have the fractures and the decay in the upper limbs.
Questions, councillor Ayling?
So if they're all going to be nearing end of life, would as council, we make a decision to, in a systematic way, take one down every couple of years and then have other ones coming up so we don't have this empty space? Or is it we just need to make a decision on one and the others we'll deal with in 50 years? Because it seems like if they're all going in that way, we should make a plan.
Perhaps I could help Clint answer. I would encourage us to start a program of raising seedlings, so that when we do have the next tree, we've got a 10-year-old that we can replace it with.
Yeah.
And so that would be my expectation that we would do, and we would take each tree on a case-by-case basis. I think they're magnificent specimens. And I wouldn't want to do a sort of carte blanche, this is what we're going to do.
So just adding to Grace's question, if the proposed upgrade to Carrington Park fails to progress, can we as a council develop a future strategy or plan for the loss of those trees and how the park is we're going to keep the street appeal of the park? Because losing those trees, it's just going to change the whole look from the road. So can we develop a plan of how we're going to address that?
That would be our preferred plan of attack. Could I just add a thought to that? That maybe we consider developing such a regeneration plan, and that also include, if it's clear that exotic trees don't do well here, why aren't we talking about natives? Why aren't we talking about trees that we know grow here naturally and grow well and are structurally more capable of withstanding the New Zealand climate? Could we factor such a thought into a future regeneration plan for Carrington Park? Just thinking.
Yeah, yes. Definitely. Talking to the community.
Yeah. Councillor Della?
Clint, you say in here that seedlings from these particular trees are already being grown. How far down the track are we with those? Are we just started or?
Well done, Clint.
Yeah, we're
This side.
yes, we're in the first year of it.
Oak trees are fairly slow growing.
Yes. Yeah.
Clint, just
That you have started.
you mentioned, or in the report, it's mentioned that the oaks are historical trees. Are there any of them listed? Are they heritage listed trees, and do we need a resource consent to cut them down?
No, they're not notable trees. They are.
They're not on our plan.
Okay.
I think the combined district plan only has 1 or 2 notable trees in Carrington, and none of which are in Carrington Park.
Thank you. Any further questions? Comments? Councillor Cherry Campbell?
Just a comment. Option 2, I feel, is the most prudent option, given the fact that investment's going to be needed to remove it in the short term to do any pruning. But then we're still going to have the cost of having it removed at some stage. So, although I do dislike removal of trees, I think that this is the right option to take. And I was really heartened to read about the seedlings from this particular tree, and them being planted in more appropriate areas. I think that's really, really good forward thinking. And then having just had our public forum attendee this morning, it would be great if the oak was repurposed through our local wheelwright and then it's still staying in the community. So,
Deputy Mayor Williams.
Yeah, the phrase I hear a lot, and with farmers as well, is right tree, right place.
Yeah.
And when I'm reading through this report, there's phrases like destination, place, base, and things like that. And I think the reality is the way Carrington Park has evolved since those trees were planted, it's an active play space for young people. And the risk associated with whatever's surrounding it is higher than a passive reserve or an amenity, aesthetic value space. So I think, I'm like everybody, cutting down trees is not ideal. However, in my opinion, that tree has served its purpose and done extremely well. But with everything else that's going on around there, preserving its life much further is going to be unrealistic. So I would support having it removed.
Right.
I just want to pick up on a point because I've heard a couple of times and just struck me that I don't know that the converse is true. We don't like taking down trees, but I don't see I see some volunteers at the start for putting up trees, but they might not carry on. We do have access to a school there that has a nursery. Last time I was at the school, which was too many years ago now, but in terms of Carrington and thinking about, so if we're taking down that certain tree, you're taking away that character. So what character can you put up in its place? Well, a whole lot of young people who are active, but active about their environment as well as active about their recreation would be interesting. Spread from the school that's handy, and there are a number of schools. Well, one's obvious. There are other schools that aren't too far away either. That could be thinking about how they gauge the growth of that, and so their involvement is a little more. I'm a little anxious about trees in terms of sometimes the comparisons about a tree as opposed to a comparison about an ecosystem. And so that actually some trees grow better in a bunch of trees as opposed to one or other. But I'm sure educators can work that out in terms of understanding how that might be. But I just thought that the opportunity was there to follow up on some of this replacement for what. For taking claiming the park as our own through a number of ways. And that's one way.
Just carrying on from the carry on and coming back to what His Worship said around natives, that's absolutely right. The totara tree just inside the gate at Carrington School, Year 8 leavers are gifted a pot with a seedling that's generated from underneath that totara tree at the school. So that helps tie in. We hope they get planted responsibly, of course, but I agree. I think the opportunity to replace imported exotics native would be an awesome step forward.
It'll be a cheap shot to compare ages, but Totara does. We do have examples of Totara a lot older than 150 years old.
But a few. Some of them.
Okay.
It's a final question. Is there a lesson to be learned from this? I mean, have we been paying as much attention to our husbandry of our stock of iconic tree throughout? I mean, how does it get to a stage where it is in this state? Are we're confident that we're learning from this tree and looking at others and seeing how we can extend their lives and make sure that they don't fall prey to the same to the type of damage we're looking at here?
We can certainly do better than what we've done in the past.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
And it was a report that Clint had asked to get done on all the trees in Carrington Park that highlighted this particular problem. So
Could we have,
it was the work that the Parks and Reserves team had done as part of the Carrington Park renewal, where we got someone in and said, look at each and every tree and tell us what you see, which is how Clint knows that they're roughly 70% on average and declining.
because we went through this with Memorial Park some years ago, And there will be those who will insist that this is all concocted in order to progress the skate park, just get rid of the trees so the skate park can go. There will be those, so the report is valuable, very valuable in that sense because the evidence is clear, but the learning and how we protect and maintain our existing stock going forward and what our plan is for replacement. Those are the two takeaways for me that are most important.
Yes. Yeah, we intend to be working to that. Yeah. Yes. Look forward to it. Should I take the opportunity to just add to that? Sorry. But it's a little bit about context. So, here's the context in terms of trees at Carrington. That's usually a high profile space that obviously people are very familiar with. But my work with Clint is that actually it's a context on a wider range of reserves. And that that's an opportunity in terms of Carrington thinking outside of the town centre park, but thinking about a whole range of reserves that I was going to say Carrington's lucky to have, but we're also lucky to have Clint who's been able to put some work into a range of reserves and just wanted that context.
Ngā Tawhai is a really good example of that, Ra, where Clint and the team have actually been planting Ngā Tawhai trees on the reserve.
Thank you. Kia ora. Excellent. Okay, we have recommendations there. The first one is we received the report. Do we have a move for that, please? Councillor Cherry Campbell, seconder. His worship, all in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. And we have the two options there. And just going by the talk around the table, I'll put agrees to option 2, removal of the tree as recommended by the arborist. All in favour, please raise your hand. Second.
We need to.
Oh, do we have a move? Thank you.
Yep.
And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Cherry Campbell. All in favour of
Aye.
option 2? Against? Carried. Thank you.
Thanks, Clint.
Well done. Thank you. Well done.
Okay,
Comms.
item
We will
6.3.
work- yes, we will
Mate.
work through a plan of comms.
Major projects update.
I could invite Christo and Johannes.
Welcome, Christo. Us to the table.
Thank you, Chair and Council members. We reporting on the major projects in town. We've got the report there and probably just highlight item 4.2 in the report. It's the High Street Water Rider Main construction has just been completed. It went very well, and the one benefit of the rider main installation is that we've done away with laterals coming across the road, which was very old and also very shallow. So that's a major advantage of the installation. And then 4.7, the climate change mitigation solar panel tenders were received, and we had 2 compliant submissions. And of those 2, Hoskins Energy Systems was highlighted as the preferred tenderer. It was then we have engaged Insight from Wellington to a resource management consultancy, and they are busy preparing consent application at this stage. Any questions?
Deputy Mayor Williams.
4.2 under the temporary traffic management, 40% cost estimate. Do councils, as the customer, do councils ever have the opportunity to challenge the extent of temporary traffic management in a job? Like, is there any ability to say that's excessive or can we have a second opinion or, you know what I mean? Or is it just,
Yes, so if I may speak to that, Deputy Mayor. So COPDM, the Code of Compliance for Traffic Management, sets out the criteria of what a safe traffic management setup looks like. The STMS, or the person that's in charge of the site, then has to follow that guidance to set up a safe space. Obviously, the whole purpose of the traffic management is to keep all the road users safe. So we do have the opportunity to discuss the contractors' methodologies and revise and refine that and work with them, as well as working with whoever is the corridor controller. Where possible, we would look at options like road closure, for instance, for a shorter period of time to keep costs down. But we do have the opportunity to be involved in keeping costs down to a certain extent.
thank you.
His Worship.
Are we being too risk averse? I mean, 40% of a cost is outrageous and it's happening everywhere. And I think if I could point to two examples, the last one was on Sunday at the Japanese commemoration on State Highway 2, where the community patrol put together a traffic management plan and supervised it. There were no accidents. There was nothing. It was a common sense plan thrown together virtually at no cost. And you compare that, and then you look at what happened to not last Christmas, the Christmas before, when the traffic management company didn't turn up, and Lions put together the same plan that they had run. Rotary put together the same.
I think it was Lions, because I
But
think Johanna said if it went wrong, it was to jail, so.
So they put together the same plan with volunteers and some support from Carrington District Council, in Glendale, I think it was, and there was no incident. It was a common sense plan, taking into account the risks they thought, and they offset it. There was no accident, and we still ended up paying a traffic management company and still ended up paying for a traffic management plan. But these costs are 40%, and it's being heavily discussed right now, both at central government. That's 40%. That's money that we need. And my question is, if the concern of management is that the result will fall upon them, are you being overly concerned? Are you grilling into the traffic management plans tightly enough? Because 40% of your cost, that's huge. It's huge.
So if I might just further to what I mentioned to Deputy Mayor as well, is we do look at opportunities of how we can do it more efficiently. The type of methodologies that we use, that is also the discussion point on the sewer renewal. One of the main considerations there was still delivering the outcome, but with different methodologies and working through that process. And where possible, we are pragmatic with the approach. So we do work through that, Your Worship.
You have the ability to do it yourself, like the council can do it ourselves, but that would mean trained personnel and personnel who's only dedicated to traffic management. And COPTM is very restrictive in the sense that we go the route of hiring companies to do it for us.
Yeah, I get why you're doing it. I get that people can't perceive risks, and now you're complying with the plans. But 40%, if we could reduce that cost, our infrastructural cost by 40%. Imagine how much more we could do.
Yep.
I'm just asking, are we tight enough?
Yeah,
No, yeah.
we'd like to see changes to some of the regulations at Copton too. Maybe we could talk to some people about how we make that happen.
We're going to have to do that.
I have a number of questions and I don't think we're going to be able to complete all our questions and the further agenda items before 10:30, which is our next meeting. We may need to adjourn and come back to this meeting after our extraordinary meeting.
Do we break for the extraordinary meeting and reconvene the policy and projects, Jeff, or do we continue?
My expectation is the extraordinary meeting won't take a long time. So it would probably be best to adjourn this meeting at around 10:30 and have a short extraordinary and then reconvene this. And that way you've got the discussion that you need to have in this meeting, time for that discussion.
Line item.
At the point we adjourn, yes. Yeah,
Line item is the budget.
it does start at 10:30.
Annual cost.
Now,
We adjourn now. That's a great deal of sense to. Unless there were more questions, you
I still have got a number of questions for this.
probably adjourn.
Send it to me.
Just adjourn and
Okay.
you'll have to give a time frame. So I guess the question is, do we want to reconvene this meeting at 10:45? Would that be sufficient time to have our extraordinary meeting and then reconvene?
I think so.
So if you adjourn now, reconvene at 10:45.
Okay, I'd like to move that we adjourn this meeting at 10:25 or even 10:24, which is now, and then re-adjourn at 10:45.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Williams. All in favour?
Right.
Thanks. Very.
Thank
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, so you'll need to come back.
Move our